Creed 2 is directed by Stephen Caple Jr. It is written by Sylvester Stallone and Theo Tadari Cocker, hope I'm pronouncing that right, and it is the follow-up to the 2015's Creed, as well as the 8th film in the Rocky franchise. The Rocky franchise is really a fascinating series, both because it is perfectly symbolic of Hollywood's absolute inability to make anything original and just pump out sequels with name recognition. But at the same time, it is a genuinely personal and authorial endeavor. Stallone's been revisiting the character every few years for decades now, as we followed him and his family through several decades of highs, lows, sickness, old age, and death, and now we're at the point of following the children's generation. It almost functions like a fictional 7-Up series for Philadelphia, or is Sylvester Stallone's version of Balzac's La Comédie Humaine. Now, way back at the announcement of Creed, I was initially really skeptical. First of all, because it was at a wave of reboots and remakes and sequels that were all terrible. But more importantly, Rocky Balboa was such a perfect end to the Rocky story, and I was afraid that bringing him back felt like they were going to ruin it somehow. I was so underwhelmed that I ended up not seeing it in theater and only caught it like a year and a half after it was initially released, and was absolutely blown away by the quality of the movie, not only because it was made by a really talented director in Ryan Coogler, although I have to admit that I'm not a fan of Fruitvale Station, but also because it was perfectly clear that it was made by somebody who perfectly understood what Rocky was as a character and as a franchise. The plot continues from where Creed left off. Adonis Creed is now the heavyweight champion of the world. He's going to be engaged to his fiancée Bianca, played by Tessa Thompson, and he's got a young child on the way. As everything is going for him, he is challenged by a young boxer from Kiev who is Ivan Drago's son. And of course there's a huge contention there because Ivan Drago was the one who ended up killing Apollo, Adonis' father, in the ring 30 years ago. And so because of the story in which you have essentially Rocky and Apollo's son and Drago's son and Ivan Drago and the son of the person who trained Apollo in Rocky IV, it does suffer from this Star Wars syndrome of everything maybe feeling a little small, of this universe feeling tiny because everybody is essentially related to one another, and it has that incestuous soap opera feel about it. But it also works because that's what Rocky's always been. It is a melodrama that is disguised as a boxing movie, in the same way that Star Wars is a soap opera masquerading as a big space opera. And because the schmaltz, the melodrama, and the cheese, and there's plenty of cheese, is done with genuine heart and love for the characters in this universe, it becomes very endearing, even when it's not perfectly written or handled in the most graceful way, which often happens during the film. One of the brilliant things about these new Creed movies is how they embrace the whole hip-hop aesthetic. Now, that was already full on in Coogler's film. I perfectly remember the sequence with the kids doing wheelies on the bikes that was straight out of 12 O'Clock Boys. I thought that was absolute genius. Now, maybe that could be considered cliche, obviously with an African-American main character, let's just throw a bunch of rap in there. But hip-hop is the biggest musical genre in the world today, and was the perfect way to modernize it, bring it to the 21st century. But also because the musical montages, which were kind of the cliched sports movie, Rocky 80s thing, just become full-on music videos at this point. Creed 2 tries to stay in line with the style that was established in the first film in the series by Ryan Coogler and his cinematographer, but it pushes it even further at points, at times going a little overboard. There are some really visually striking moments to be sure, but nothing quite as memorable and with the staying power as some of the moments in the original Creed. Because of the plot, obviously a lot of elements in Creed 2 harken back to Rocky IV. I love Rocky IV, I've even got the soundtrack on vinyl, but Rocky IV is not a good movie. It was made at the height of Stallone's megalomania, and it's basically about Stallone punching the Cold War out of existence and making the Russians realize that America is awesome. This doesn't possess any of that rah-rah America fuck yeah, but it doesn't go out of its way to portray Russia in any interesting light or in a subtle way either. It does touch on how Drago, as a rising boxing star, becomes completely co-opted by Russian politicians as a figurehead for Russia on the international stage. But considering where Russia is today with rising nationalism and the current US-Russia international relationships, there maybe could have been something really interesting to tap into. The movie really doesn't go there and seems very afraid to tackle anything political, which, considering what happens when Stallone injects too much politics into his screenplays, is probably a good thing. He's a far more apt director when he stays within the personal. I say this almost as if Stallone had directed the movie, and obviously he didn't, he only co-wrote it, but, you know, this series is so much Stallone's thing that his voice and his spirit is present in everything Rocky, and so even if he didn't direct it, obviously I consider him as the sort of creative force behind it. What's really interesting with the film is what they do with the Drago characters and how they treat that dynamic. It starts off as extremely cliched. You've got the Russian who doesn't have much, who's born and bred to be a fighter. All he does is train hard and is obsessed with winning. That's really all there is to his life. He couldn't be more different to Don, who has money, a wife, a child on the way, and essentially has a real life. Dolph Lundgren plays as an almost sadistic, obsessive helicopter parent who only seems to love his son for what he can accomplish in his name, how he can bring about a new legacy for the Drago name, but as it moves on, it evolves and becomes more complex. It's not exceptionally well pulled off or written, and it has a lot of that soap opera level stuff. It almost seems like they're trying to subvert the machine-like aspect they gave Ivan Drago in Rocky IV and are trying to make up for it. By presenting Viktor as this almost robot at first, the ultimate enemy, and then gradually granting him more and more humanity. By the end, what happens between Drago and his son is a perfect bookend to Rocky IV. It's a genuinely great, heartfelt character moment, to the point where a Drago film maybe would have been more interesting than a Creed film, because everything that happens with Adonis has this been there, done that feel about it. It hits every beat you would expect it to hit. Now, you could say that about Creed, but because it had this new window dressing, it worked. It was also more focused, it had a lot less characters to contend with. Because there are more characters in this one, and they actually go out of their way and try to, you know, give them real emotional moments, they kind of deal with that in a very awkward way, which is through a lot of cross-cutting. So you'll have one character deliver an emotional speech or have a dialogue, and then they'll immediately cut to another character doing something that's also emotionally resonant for him. The problem with that is that one scene sort of undercuts the other and takes away what might have happened if they had existed in this soul-contained environment. Creed 2 is not perfect. It's like comfort food. It's certainly not what you should be nourishing yourself from exclusively, and it's certainly not going to blow your mind or change your horizons. But once in a while, when it's made with love and care and craft, it's just a great reminder that sometimes the simple things in life are great. Oh, and before I leave, nobody in Hollywood says bruh better than Michael B. Jordan, and it is really to this film's detriment that they do not exploit this to the max.
Fuck you say about my moms, bruh? I'ma see your bitch ass on the outside, bruh. Fuck off me, bruh. You good, bro? I saw you, bro. Nice to meet you too, bro. Happy New Year, bro.
So as always, thanks very much for watching. Be sure to hit the like button if you like the review. Please subscribe if you're new. And like with all the Rocky films, there will be another one of these out at some point, because there always is. It'll never end. And until next time, see ya.